And we're live. Welcome to February 2024's edition of Unpacking Endpoint Management. We've got an excellent topic for you today. Hi, I'm your host, Steve Thomas, and my co-host, Danny Guillory, will not be here today, unfortunately. So we have filling in for Danny Guillory, Mr. Joe Laurie from the Intune product team. How are you, Joe? Good to have you back there from Boston.
I'm great, Steve. Thanks, and thanks, Danny, for not being here, giving me the opportunity to be here.
We have with us today a very special guest, a guy who I've been teammates with before, and he is the principal product manager from the Intune product group, Mr. Bill Calero, here to talk to us about something brand new coming to the Intune Suite. The Intune Suite, that is, Cloud PKI. Bill, how are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm good. It's great to be here. Very exciting. It's an exciting time as well. All right. Start with a little bit about myself. Let's see. Been here at Microsoft for about 9 years now. Actually, I think I just made my 9-year anniversary. That's a huge triumph.
Congratulations to you.
I never thought that I would be here at Microsoft for 9 years. To be honest, I actually competed fiercely against Microsoft for many years with another company. And so, but I got to tell you, when Satya Nadella took the helm, again, it really transformed things for me, and it made me want to come work at Microsoft. And I started my role here as what they call a CXC CAT engineer, working for the Intune engineering group. CAT stands for Customer Acceleration Team. And essentially, I helped customers onboard to Intune back in the day, 9 years ago, if you can imagine that, from its infancy. So we've come a long, long way.
All right, so Cloud PKI is a topic. Post your questions now at https://aka.ms/join-UEM. All right. So, Joe, do we have any questions coming in?
We do, but even before I ask that one question, Bill, what exactly is Cloud PKI? Before we start talking about like when it will be available and what exactly is it? Let's say I didn't go to Ignite. I never heard about it before. What exactly is it? And then I'll start asking questions. We have a great question from Daniel.
Sure. So when you think about a PKI, public key infrastructure, there are a number of different components that make up a PKI service, right? You've got certificate authorities responsible for the issuance of certificates, and then you've got the accompanying infrastructure, for example, like where you're going to host the certificate revocation list, where you're going to host what's called the AIA, or the Authority Information Access endpoint, that provides essentially intermediate public keys for those requesting it. You've got what's called a certificate registration authority. And so there are a number of components that make up a PKI. And Cloud PKI, and Microsoft Cloud PKI within Intune, essentially provides a PKI service for the customer, right? And we've the mantra for Cloud PKI from day one has been to essentially help customers simplify and consolidate the complexity around PKI, because PKI is could be pretty challenging for a lot of customers. When I started here at Microsoft, I somehow got bamboozled into taking on the work efforts associated with helping customers onboard to Endes and helping them deliver certificates. And it's a long story. I won't go into it. I won't drop any names. But again, at the end of the day, a word of advice for many folks, I think, sometimes things are a blessing in disguise. So if you don't want to get into something or dig deep into a particular subject matter, you never know what the silver lining would be to that pain and effort that you have to commit in the beginning and the stress associated with it. Long story short, digging my teeth into PKI has been, very, very worthwhile for my career here at Microsoft, and I'll leave it at that. But getting back to the Cloud PKI and what it is, it essentially helps customers deploy certificates that can be used for certificate-based authentication. Essentially, we can issue certificates to Intune enrolled devices, and we'll start there, and I'm sure we'll unpack this a little further as we go along.
Oh, I like how you threw unpack in there. That was a nice little reference to.
It's always a great word, unpack.
For more information on everything Bill's talking about, we have the link up there, aka.ms/Microsoft Cloud PKI. All right, great. Let's get into the questions. Daniel is on our tech community, and he's asking, are you allowed to share the date that this will become publicly available? And if so, what day will this become publicly available?
Sure. Well, the date is right around the corner. And so I'll be completely transparent with this date. This date has had a little too much complexity around it, right? So essentially, a few things. Let me get the easiest thing out of the way. So starting March 1st, essentially everyone should be able to take advantage of Cloud PKI. They should be able to start a trial within the Intune console. They can go to tenant administration, the Intune console, and then we have a new node within tenant administration, and it's called Cloud PKI. From there, essentially you can start creating your CAs and that sort of thing. But if the create button is grayed out, it means that you haven't started a trial, or you don't have the Intune Suite license, or you don't have the Cloud PKI standalone product add-on, right? So what you'll have to do is you can start a trial, or you can acquire a license at that point. It's up to you. But once you do that, you'll be able to create CAs pretty effortlessly.
So that was March 1st.
So March 1st is when things really start lighting up. The complex problem, or the complex part of the answer, is for customers who already have the suite or who have an active trial. With Intune, with the Intune release called 2402, which is essentially has happened this month.
This week.
The Cloud PKI node has lit up for them, right? However, if they've tried to hit the create button, we let them hit the create, but when they try to finish, they'll probably get an error at the end. Essentially, we have to complete what's called a backfill process. So things got a little out of hand this last week. And like I said, I like being transparent, very real with customers. And so just wait till the end of the week. You'll be ready to roll. We have to backfill those customers who have active trials or an active suite license. But by the end of the week, you should be good to go. You should be golden.
Bill telling us how the sausage is made. That's
not how the sausage is made, but it's sharing some of the bumps along the way. That's all. Being real.
Okay. Yeah. So should I? If it's one thing, and it's a topic we have today about the capabilities of moving from on-prem to the cloud using the Intune Suite's Cloud PKI, but we have a question from Mark. Can you fully replace PKI on-prem with this product, like auto-enrollment, Active Directory? What about those customers that are still in hybrid environments or that might still need to run on-premises AD?
Yeah.
So and actually, before you answer that, I need to say thank you, Mark, for using the full term on-premises, because most people say on-premise, and you got it correct. On-premises. ES at the end. Thank you, Mark. All right, Bill, go ahead.
Joe's pet peeve there.
I warned Bill this was like Sports Center, so
on-premises. So I'm guilty of potentially using both. Anyhow, all right. Can you fully replace your on-prem PKI? Straight answer: you cannot. Right. You can greatly simplify and reduce the essentially the workload associated with your private certificate authority or your private PKI. So if you're using ADCS, essentially ADCS has been around for many years, and it's had time to mature and have a great deal of functionality associated with it, right? So you can issue all types of certificates with ADCS. Okay, with Cloud PKI, this is literally our first entry point into a PKI service. It's well integrated with Intune, and so what you can do is you can issue certificates to Intune enrolled devices. The key usage or the extended key usage that you can assign to the certificates that get issued, essentially, that's up to you in terms of what you want to assign. But typically, certificates within Intune are used for certificate-based authentication to access either on-prem resources like a Wi-Fi access point using cert-based auth, a VPN supporting cert-based auth, applications that support cert-based auth. You can even use those certificates to authenticate to the M365 set of apps that support cert-based auth. But certificates, remember, whenever a device makes a secure connection to authenticate, especially over certificate-based authentication, then a TLS SSL certificate is in play, right? So we are not in this first release of Cloud PKI, we are not supporting the ability to issue SSL TLS certificates to servers. Now, that is one of the most hotly requested new features to follow on for Cloud PKI, and it's something that essentially once we GA, we're going to hit the think tanks and we're going to start tackling that problem. Now, when will that surface? I can't say at the moment. I can't really talk about what's next in the roadmap, but SSL TLS certificates is again in very much demand, and it's something that we'd like to pursue as well. But the long story short is no, you can't fully replace your on-prem PKI with this first release of Cloud PKI. Will it be possible in the future? It's something that we would like to strive to achieve that goal, right? Help customers lift and shift that complexity completely over to the cloud. And again, it's one of our goals. But again, that's a long road ahead of us, and we're going to get there, I think.
Well, thanks for that transparency. And for those of you that love acronym alphabet soup, so far I think I've gotten PKI, AIA, NDES, which is NDES, ADCS, SSL, TL. I got 6 acronyms so far.
7, you forgot EKU.
I have an acronym decoder in all of my presentations. So I literally stick that up. It's one of the first slides I have in all my presentations because, yes, there's a lot of acronyms that get thrown around when we talk about PKI, cryptography, that kind of thing. But, yeah, if you want to rattle those off, ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, NDES, Network Device Enrollment Service, AIA, Authority Information Access, CRIL, Certificate Revocation List. So again,
I think at our aka.ms /Microsoft Cloud PKI, maybe we could have a chart that, have that decoder there, maybe.
Yeah. Need a decoder.
We have another question from Gary. Gary from LinkedIn says, I approached Microsoft to implement PKI on Azure about 2 years ago when I implemented a 2-tier PKI based on Server 2019's ADCS on Azure VMs globally for a well-known company. I'll be curious. So Gary's curious how Microsoft implemented their PKI PaaS service, another acronym PaaS, service, and if it also includes managing key vaults. Will it also extend to on-premises? What can you share with to help Gary?
Oh, I can't share how Microsoft internally, rolled out their, PKI infrastructure. I think that's something that's a bit non-disclosure to cover on this call. But yeah, I'll take another call. Another question.
Can you answer if our service is going to manage key vaults, anything like that?
So with Cloud PKI, let's just say I go in at the end of the week and I create a CA. Okay, actually, even before I create the CA, let's just say I don't have Cloud PKI and I want to start a trial, right? So when you start a trial, you're in a trial mode, and the CAs that you create, the certification authorities that you create, those will use what's called software back keys, right? Essentially, a CA, there are 2 primary keys associated with each certificate authority. There's a signing key and an encryption key, and those keys, essentially, they're software backed. So they use a CNG software backed cryptography method for those keys. When you have a license for Cloud PKI, so I have a license, and now I'm ready to roll with it, moving forward. Essentially, the CAs that you create, those CAs will actually use what's called hardware back keys, or HSM. And we leverage the Azure Managed HSM service to provision those keys, right, on behalf of the customer. Customers do not have to manage any of these keys. Intune takes care of that complexity for them. Now, beyond that, future stuff, right? There's a capability for a lot of that some cloud providers provide, and it's called bring your own keys, right? Bring your own certificate authority keys, and so that's something that we have planned, longer road down the roadmap. So the ability for you to essentially bring your own certificate authority keys, so you can create an account with Azure Managed HSM. We don't know about Key Vault just yet, Azure Key Vault. It could be one of the potential Key Vault stores that we support for the signing and encryption keys. But that the set of that capability to bring your own keys because you want to manage and keep full control of your own keys, that's something that's, again, forward looking.
Great, thanks, Bill. We have a question from Boris, who's watching on Tech Community. What will be trust boundaries for the service? Will it generate internally only trusted certificates, or will it be possible to issue cross-tenant or globally trusted certificates?
Okay, so essentially, the CAs that we create, they're private CAs, right? So they're not going to be anchored up to any of the DNS, public certificate authorities. We support 2 deployment models with Cloud PKI, and both can coexist, by the way. So you can have a root issuing, or again, multiple root issuing combinations. There's a lot of flexibility there we can get into. But essentially, if you create when you create a root in the cloud in your Intune tenant, that's that's private to your Intune tenant. And then you'll create an issuing CA. Only the issuing CAs issue the certificates to devices. That's fully instantiated in the cloud. Then there is another deployment model called Bring Your Own Certificate Authority, right? With Bring Your Own Certificate Authority, essentially you create an issuing CA in the cloud. When you go through the create process in the cloud, the first step is to create or generate what's called a certificate signing request, right? So basically, the issuing CA in the cloud, you generate a CSR, certificate signing request. You download that certificate signing request, and you have it signed by your private CA, right? And that private CA could be Active Directory certificate services. It could be a third-party CA, but it must be a private CA. It cannot be anchored to a public certificate authority. So these CAs are all from a private point of view. But you can integrate, again, bring your own certificate authority with your on-prem ADCS environment, which I think is one of the most flexible, meet the customer where they're at kind of deployment that they can have. Now, again, both methodologies can easily coexist with each other. Hope that answers the question.
Yep. Would you think of a bring your own CA as a step towards Cloud PKI, or is that actually a destination?
Well, again, it really depends on the customer and where they're at, right? And I think what's important, or what's a philosophy that Microsoft has, and I'll call it a philosophy, is essentially we're not trying to push anybody anywhere, right? We present a set of solutions that are very flexible and help the customer. We meet the customer where they're at. Okay, Bring Your Own CA is a fantastic facility where the customer, we want to maintain full control of that root on-prem. Okay, and at any given point, they feel they're empowered to just revoke that issuing certificate, the issuing CA certificate that was signed on-prem into the cloud. They can just revoke that, and essentially at that point in time, any of the certificates that were issued through the issuing CA in the cloud, essentially they're invalidated, basically, right? To keep it simple. So again, when you're using BYOCA, Bring Your Own Certificate Authority, you're using Cloud PKI, right? If you want to do full, root issuing in the cloud, you're using Cloud PKI, right? So again, it just depends on how you want to start deploying. I will be transparent as well. BYOCA allows customers who have a lot of infrastructure or relying parties, and those relying parties, like the radio servers, the Wi-Fi servers, they're very dispersed. and they're hard to get to. BYOCA allows the customer to adopt Cloud PKI in a much faster rate because something called the chain of trust is already deployed out, right? Essentially, and when the issuing CA gets anchored to that on-prem infrastructure, certificates from the issuing CA are essentially trusted because they're anchored all the way to the root on-prem. And so BYOCA is sort of, I think, a fast adoption, fast deployment model.
Cool.
Joe, you notice how you watch this show regularly. You notice how the show's gotten really good with the guests talking more and me talking less. I've noticed that too.
I have noticed that. Absolutely.
Now, we got a question from the tech community, Jeff. I have an NPS server with a third-party certificate that integrates with Meraki access points to do Wi-Fi authentication. Will this solution replace my NPS solution? Please say yes.
No. Sorry.
Gotta be honest.
No, so again, NPS is a radius solution, right? Cloud PKI is not a radius solution. We are delivering certificates, right? We're issuing certificates. We're managing the life cycle of certificates. We provide the associated infrastructure to facilitate the delivery of the certificates, but we're not a radius service. Is radius in the crystal ball? Is it in Intune's crystal ball of the future? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Right? But we're not replacing an NPS. NPS is a radius service. Cloud PKI is a public key infrastructure service that's issuing certificates, and what those certificates are used for and presented for. Essentially, NPS is one of those services. We again, NPS is one of the endpoints that we support, obviously, because we've done the testing behind NPS. But we're not a radius service.
Yeah, it's a good point to
Great
bring
question.
up. It's a great question. It's a good point that you bring up, and you've mentioned a couple of times. It's a great solution for your Intune managed devices. I've had my customers say to me, "Well, what about my printers? What about my routers and e-certificates?" Yep. You may still need to have your on-premises solution for that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we got a comment from Stefan on Tech Community as well. And Stefan, it's nice to see you. I usually see you with the Windows Updates question, so it's great to see you branching out to Cloud PKI as well. And it's more of a comment than a question. It's my understanding, Stefan says, that Cloud PKI solution only supports Intune and co-managed devices. If that's the case, a lot of orgs will still need to have an on-prem PKI infrastructure for their servers and their non-supported workstations. What are your thoughts to help such orgs to see the benefits of Cloud PKI? You mentioned earlier reducing the workload on the on-prem, but what are the benefits to using Cloud PKI over keeping their current on-prem solution, knowing they still have to keep it for other stuff?
Sure. By the way, it's a great question, great assessment, great insight from Stefan's point of view. Right? And I think we covered it earlier on. I kind of mentioned some of the key points that Stefan's covering. But let's talk about what the benefit of Cloud PKI is, right? So, if you've ever deployed an NDES server, okay, to issue certificates to your Intune managed devices for VPN cert-based auth, Wi-Fi cert-based auth, or whatever you were using, even Windows Hello for Business, when you're doing cert trust, right? I think. So if you've ever deployed an NDES server, there are a number of things that have to be done. You've got to deploy the NDES server. It's not the easiest thing to deploy. NDES has two certificates that essentially granted its superpowers to request certificates on behalf of a third party. An NDES server is essentially a certificate registration authority, right? And it allows NDES to request certificates on behalf of a third party, right? Those two certificates, and I don't think I mentioned it, but it's something called the CEP encryption certificate and the Exchange Enrollment Agent Offline certificate. Essentially, that's the signing certificate, right? Those two certificates don't auto-renew. You've got to either do very long lives associated with them or know how to renew them, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to renew. You got to keep that Index server patched, updated.
To that point, most of my customers do
I'm just saying,
long life.
They
do the very long life.
You also have to set up either a reverse proxy, F5 reverse proxy, or a third-party reverse proxy, whatever it may be, or Azure App Proxy. I always recommend customers deploy Azure App Proxy if they're doing an Index server, because it's literally the fastest, easiest way to adopt it, right? You want to export that in or make that Index URL available externally. And then you need the Intune certificate connector, right? And then once you do all of that, okay, you then start issuing certificates, okay? Now, you issue certificates, you can issue hundreds of thousands of certificates depending on, the renewal cycles that you have in the SCEP certificate profile, or how many devices or users you have. Maybe you issue certificates to both the user key store and the machine key store. You're issuing a lot of certificates. There's a lot of load, a lot of capacity, considerations that have to be made on your on-prem CA infrastructure. Essentially, you are lifting and shifting that responsibility over to the cloud. So again, when you just think about what I've just described, you need someone who's very familiar, essentially an SME who can essentially manage that infrastructure for you. You're lifting and shifting that responsibility. I think that, Cloud PKI is a very worthwhile endeavor. Let me just put it that way.
So let's talk platforms, Bill. And we have a question from Craig from the tech community. What level of support is available for non-Windows devices, for the Apple ecosystem, Mac and iOS?
Yep. Number one, Cloud PKI supports the Intune SCEP certificate profile. So any platform in Intune that supports the SCEP certificate profile, we support, right? And any of the use cases that we support with integrating or linking the SCEP certificate profile into the policy for Wi-Fi VPN, we support. Okay, so yeah. So I'll call out the platform. We support we support iOS, iPad, Android, all the Android flavors. We support Mac OS, right? Linux is not supported because there still isn't support for the SCEP certificate profile with Linux. I don't know if that's a roadmap feature, but that's outside of my wheelhouse in terms of my responsibility that I control that. So if you, but I have put in a request to the RA team, resource access team, who now is responsible for SCEP. And so, again, it's for Linux support. It's really all, customers create the demand, create the necessity. Essentially, they drive the priorities for us. And so,
absolutely, I'm going to ask all of you if you do have a question on, when Linux will be, or I really need Linux to be supported. The little smiley or the send feedback that's within the Intune Admin Center. Click the send a smiley, send a frown. I forget what we actually call it, and enter that feedback. That goes right to the right people, and we got to keep track of that kind of feedback. And also we have our aka.ms, and that'll be up here in a minute, Intune feedback page where you can also publish your feedback for that. Thank you. aka.ms/Intune feedback. All right, we do have a question. I was kind of hoping to avoid questions like this, but all right, so we have a question from Vaishnav. Can we use Cloud PKI, all the Cloud PKI features, as long as we have the Intune Suite add-on, or is there anything else we're going to need to purchase? And I'm going to preface this by saying, I assume you already have licenses for Intune. And then the question is, okay, I have the Intune Suite. Either I have the Intune Suite or I have the Cloud PKI add-on. Do I need anything else?
For issuing certificates to your devices, your Intune managed devices, no, you don't need anything else. So the suite, if you've already, have the suite license, then you're good to go. You can start issuing certificates once the console lights up for you. Wait till the end of the week, and you should be good to go. Nothing else is required. Again, remember, no Windows servers, no Intune connectors, no proxies, none of that. You don't need to issue certificates to your set of managed devices. You're good to go. If you're not a suite customer, Cloud PKI will also be available as a standalone add-on right? So if you go to Intune, the Intune tenant administration, you go to, I'm just looking at the console over there, I'm cheating a little
Tenant
bit.
administration, Intune add-ons.
Intune add-ons, if you go to Intune add-ons, you'll see that towards the bottom, you can actually acquire Cloud PKI as a standalone item. So,
and for those of you that are enterprise-sized customers of your education or government or whatever, talk to your account teams. Most of you have account teams, and they can help you out as well.
So we have a question from Michael, also from the tech community. Lively participation today. Can we export the CA and intermediate CA certificates so third-party services can trust the created certificates?
Yes, you have to do that. You actually have to do that, right? I do a whole, discussion or talk on what's called chain of trust, right? So in order for when I say the term, or when I use the term relying party, I mean essentially your radius service, the Wi-Fi access point that's linked into, that's configured to talk to the radius service, the VPN servers, any kind of, web app server or, application server that's supporting certificate-based auth. So you need to export the keys from the Cloud PKI onto those relying parties and do whatever necessary configuration is to get those certificates in the trust store for those applications, so that when the Intune issued certificate from the issuing CA in the cloud is presented to that relying party, it's trusted. Okay. So yes, we do support, and the docs just went live today. So if you do have access to the Cloud PKI node in the console, the doc links are active. So, or you can go to the Intune documentation. I don't have it.
Just go to aka.ms.
Yeah, just go to the Intune docs. Cloud PKI, the docs are live.
Cloud PKI.
I added a lot of documentation, and more documentation's coming. There will be a migration guide, so I'll head up a question if someone's asking about a migration guide. And there are different deployment models associated with how customers can adopt or migrate parts of their on-premise PKI to the cloud. Migration in terms of, hey, I used NDES today, or I used the PKCS certificates, and I want to use Cloud PKI. How do I make that transition? So that will be covered in the migration section of the online docs. Not yet available. It was just too much for me to do this week, and so I didn't get that in. But that will light up. The migration section within the online docs will light up. Give it about a week or two, and you'll see it in there. But Cloud PKI docs, they're all up there. I did the best I could with covering deployment models, chain of trust, trying to provide as much education through online docs as possible. So hopefully I did okay.
I'm sure you covered it all. You've been working on this. I'm sure you've covered it all. We have another question on tech community from Igal, who, and you may have covered this already earlier, but so just for clarity, are these PKIs, are they HSM backed?
Yes. So again, just to cover the scenario again, just in case folks missed my earlier spiel on it, when you're in a trial and you create CAs in a trial, right? Essentially, the keys are software-backed keys. Okay. When you are actually licensed for Cloud PKI, whether it's through the suite or through standalone, and you create CAs, the CAs that you create are HSM backed, right? So again, and if folks are familiar with HSM, that is not an inexpensive proposition. It's actually kind of expensive to have HSM backed keys, but we feel that is, again, the best, first class kind of security that you can have for a certificate authority. And by the way, just getting back to the whole, hey, is this worthwhile? If you've ever done an NDES implementation using a third-party HSM, it is not easy. I've done about 5 of them for customers, and it is just not an easy task. And so again, that's part of I think the virtue of Cloud PKI. We remove all of that complexity from the customer.
Quick bit of housekeeping for those of you listening and not watching, those docs that we referred to earlier at aka.ms/cloud PKI docs. Cloud PKI docs. Bill, we have a follow-up question from Gary on LinkedIn. Is it a redundant service? For example, how is BCDR implemented across Azure regions and subscriptions? Will it be available in the government cloud as well? So actually multiple questions here.
I slammed my finger. I dislocated my finger about 2 weeks ago. I do a lot of hiking, guys, and so
he didn't really. He was afraid I was going to make him do a pull-up contest.
Yeah, I put the stint
and
on.
So he put the splint on to save him from doing the pull-up contest.
No, but I almost bit the dust a couple of weeks ago. Do a little ice climbing. But anyway, back to the question, the proper question. BCDR. So
as business continuity.
It's a great question. It allows me to talk a little bit more about the PKI service and Intune. So if you look at your Intune tenant, if you go to your Intune tenant, you'll know on the tenant status that your tenant is essentially located in a particular region for where it's instantiated or where it's created. So most likely North American customers have their tenants located in North America, and we have a number of what we call scale units. And these scale units are located in the Azure infrastructure in the appropriate region, as close as we can get to the customer. Customers can request what's called tenant moves. So if they want to move their tenant from one region to another, they can make that request, a special support request, blah, blah, blah. EU customers tend to have their Intune tenant in an EMEA scale unit. And then, of course, APAC customers tend to have their tenants in an APAC scale unit, pretty much. Cloud PKI is co-located where the customer's tenant is, located within that geo region, right? It may not be the exact scale unit where the customer's tenant at, but it is in the same geo region, okay? And then, of course, we do BCDR for the PKI service within that region. So we don't want to have, for GDPR reasons and such, we can't have, PKIs rolling over, from North America over to EMEA and vice versa, right? So it's a constraint that we enforce. And again, you don't control where your PKI is co-located with your tenant, but it is in the same region as your tenant. One more thing, I'll just throw it out there. So if there's a lot of demand for it, I'd like to hear it. I've had some requests for essentially having more control over where the certificate authorities get created, right? So I've heard from some customers that they want to basically be able to dictate, hey, I'm a North American customer, but I've got end users in EMEA, and I really want to essentially issue their certificates from a certificate authority in EMEA or EU. And so that kind of capability is not present yet. If it's something that I've got a backlog item for it, and again, based on demand from customers, it's something that we could potentially deliver in the future. So hopefully that answered that question.
Again, feedback. Intune feedback, or send a smiley in the console.
Government Cloud. The question around Gov Cloud, I didn't answer that. That's going to come hopefully within a 90-day period after we GA. So I'm hoping within 3 months after we GA, which is March 1st, figure add 3 months of that. And the Gov, actually, it just depends. We have two different types of government customers. We have what's called GCC high customers, so they have to have a certain set of constraints associated with where their services are created. So for GCC high, that's the 30-day, that's a 90-day period out, and for regular Gov customers,
GCC,
it's GCC customers. We're ready day one.
Cool.
Hopefully, I'm not sharing too much information.
We've been watching you make sausage for about 40 minutes now. So we got it.
I'm gonna get my hand slapped when I get off this call.
But Danny usually takes that role, getting his hand slapped, getting off this call anyway. So someone has to. We have another question from Tech Community from Nigel. Nigel, nice to see you as well. Thank you for participating in this. Where does the Cloud PKI license need to be applied? The admin, the end user, the device, everything, this is going to make a big difference when we start costing it out. Is this a per user per month license? Is it a per device per month license? Is it an admin only license? How do we do the licensing?
Yeah.
And again, before you even answer, I'm going to say, talk to your account executive, Nigel.
Obviously, talk to the account rep. I think that, talking to account reps, you always achieve the greatest level of flexibility. And again, before I get myself into trouble, I'm going to leave it at that. But it's on a, for lack of a better word, per user per month, right? Now, if you don't have a user on the device, it could be per device per month, right? So, but again, I think that the account exec, having that discussion with the account exec affords you the greatest level of.
Just for a little clarity, we don't have, Intune Suite doesn't have a per device license. So everything is a per user per month license. Some of the solutions have a frontline license as well.
Scenarios, there may be a license in the future specific for frontline worker for Cloud PKI, but not now. So you just figure something out with your account exec.
So we have a question from Mario, and we've gotten this question not only from him but also from a lot of the MVPs like Tim Mangan. I would be interested in what other certificate use cases you may have on the roadmap, particularly code signing templates for like app signing. As far as I understand, we only support VPN and Wi-Fi certificate authentication use cases right now.
Yeah, so Wi-Fi VPN is supported. Again, if you have an application server on-prem that supports certificate-based authentication, that would be supported. The M365 apps that support certificate-based authentication, those scenarios should be supported. And I'm going to get myself into trouble. Hello for Business, cert-based auth should work. I haven't tested it yet, but it should work. So I'm probably getting myself into trouble. Other types of certificates, scenarios that we would support in the future. Code signing is, again, one of those things that sort of fast follows right after SSL certificates. So, I would say that SSL certificates is the forerunner, the top mostly requested next type of certificate that we could potentially deliver. And then, of course, code signing, will they show up at the same time? I don't know. But yeah, it's something things that we would like to do for sure.
Hopefully, Bill's not breaking himself into jail, as Danny likes to say on the show all the time.
I probably am.
Yeah, it's so hard to. I mean, you want to share so much information.
I know.
You do.
They say ask for forgiveness later, right? That's what they say.
Right. And honestly, some of our executives do share an awful lot of information that they probably shouldn't be sharing.
Yeah.
We have another question coming to us from tech community, and it's something that you had talked about earlier, but just looking for a little recap. Could you please recap how PKI client certificates renewal will work with the Cloud PKI service?
Sure. If you've ever looked at a SCEP certificate profile in the Intune console, they've been around for many years, relatively well documented, I think. Essentially, there is a property within the SCEP certificate profiles called the renewal threshold, I believe, and it's a percentage. So a lot of folks just take the default, I think it's 20%. So, and then that renewal threshold is based on the validity period that you assign the certificate. So essentially, if you, in the SCEP certificate profile, you say, I want a 1 year certificate profile, 1 year certificate to get issued to the device with the 20% renewal rate. Essentially, when there's 20% left of the certificate, then the device and essentially the OS would request a new certificate. We actually don't renew the certificate. We issue a new certificate to the device, just again being transparent. But we take care of all of that in a completely automated fashion from the customer. The customer does not have to be concerned with when the certificate renewals are going to happen. We do that automatically behind the scenes based on the MDM channel. And again, it's based also on the operating system itself. There are some particulars there that come into play with each OS, some uniqueness. But again, hasn't been an issue that I'm aware of. But the renewal process is automatic. Same thing with revocation. So when a certificate is removed from the service, we remove the device from the remove the certificate from the device and then issue a revoke of the certificate just in case. And when you look at the issuing CA in the cloud, that we have a monitoring dashboard, you'll see how many certificates are active, how many certificates have expired, how many certificates have been revoked, either through manual certificate revocation or the automated certificate revocation process that I just spoke about. And and expired. There's also expired certificates, right? So, yeah, I think that covers it. By the way, I added some nuance there that I don't know if you caught it, but not only do we support auto revocation of the certificates, but we also support the ability to manually revoke a issued certificate to the device. Basically, you go to the issuing CA where the certificate was issued. You just search for that certificate either to the user UPN, the device name, blah blah blah. You locate it, you click on it, and you can revoke it. So you can literally just revoke that certificate right there on the spot if you needed to.
That's awesome.
So actually, we have an honest question from X, formerly Twitter.
Not a dishonest question, but an honest question.
Yeah, these days it's interesting.
I never heard of a dishonest question.
And they're asking a question that I'm sure many endpoint managers may want to know but are afraid to ask. How much PKI knowledge do I really need to have to administer this?
I love that question because, like, even just being in this meeting, all the terms that you're saying, you feel like only a PKI admin that's been doing it for many years would understand. But honestly, how much PKI knowledge do they need to do this?
All right, so let's be real honest about this question, okay? Because it's an honestly asked question. All right, so we made things incredibly simple, okay? When I say that, let me just sort of couch what I mean by incredibly simple. Like I said before, if you've ever deployed an NDES server, if you've ever had to configure the Azure App Proxy, if you've ever had to, integrate with your PKI, with your CA, ADCS CA by the installation of the NDES server, there's a lot of, tech knowledge that's required there, right? You really have to know what you're doing, and a lot of folks don't get it right. Now, obviously, there's some folks who are great out there, right? And, they've been doing this kind of work for many, many years. But again, they're sort of, the experts. And so they come with a price tag associated with them, right? And rightfully so, because they're great. And so there's a lot of complexity associated with setting up and integrating a PKI. From that point of view, we've made it incredibly simple. I mean, incredibly simple. You don't need to have a speck of knowledge in terms of just the basic fundamentals for creating a full-fledged certificate authority that's going to issue certificates to devices.
Do you have a demo environment available at all?
I do. Well, actually, there's going to be a demo environment that's going to be made available for.
No, I mean for right now, like you
could I could show it right now if you wanted to, but let me just finish answering the question. So the second half of that question is, well, I still need to know about what's called chain of trust, right? Because these certificates just don't work automatically, right? You've got to deploy what's called the public keys. You've got to remember you're going to deliver this certificate to do something. You want to present it for cert-based auth, right? To connect to a Wi-Fi. It's just deploying the certificate to the device. That's easy. That's a very easy part. But you've got to configure that Wi-Fi to trust that certificate. And so that part, that's out of our reach. So we're not doing that, okay, just yet. And so, yes, you still need to have knowledge about chain of trust. You've got to work with your infrastructure folks to make sure that they get the public keys out to those relying parties and configure those relying parties to trust those public keys. And so from that point of view, you still have to have your experts, right? And you still have to have the folks on the ground who know that infrastructure and who can manage that infrastructure. So that part of it still exists for sure. We made it a lot simpler, very, very much simpler, but there's still that part of the complexity, right, of the equation. And so that's I think that's a pretty honest answer to an honest question.
All right, thanks, Bill.
I can't demo potentially.
We have about just under 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes.
You can do it in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I don't know. Could I do it in 10 minutes? It really all depends, because usually the demo gods have not been kind to me, especially this week. But hey, man, I'll take my chances.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So,
first we need to share
Heather,
your screen.
how do I share my screen? Heather's the production person behind the scenes, making all the magic happen. Present. Let's see. Okay, present.
No, not that screen. I'm just kidding.
Oh, were you serious?
No, we can't see anything until Heather allows us to.
So Heather, I had the option to stop my screen or to continue. Is it not presenting? All right, so you can see it. You can see the SteamYard.
Yeah, we'll fix this in post.
Are we good or not good?
Yep, there we go.
There we go.
All right, great. Let me just minimize this. Let me bring this screen over here. And so you should see the Intune console right now. Can you give me a positive response?
Yeah, can you maximize the window, maybe?
Let's go F11 here. Is that maxed?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, beautiful. Okay, so again, tenant administration, Cloud PKI, this is where we live, okay? In this view, you'll see all of your CAs, your root CAs, your issuing CAs, your BYO CAs, your bring your own certificate authority CAs, they will all show up here. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create an issuing CA anchored to one of the root CAs that I already have, for brevity, for time and brevity. So you come in here, you give it an object name. So here we're going to go. We'll do I don't know. Let's just do, because I can't think of a good word right now. Demo issuing CA. All right, I'll just give it a name, a number one. I'm sorry. So this is just the object name of the CA. Has nothing to do with the subject name of the CA. Let's hit next. I'm going to create an issuing CA. You see, you have two options on the CA type that you're creating. You're going to create an issuing CA. Then you select the root source. Where is this issuing CA going to be anchored to? So I am going to, you have your bring your own root CA option that we talked about before. But in this case, just to keep things super simple here, I'm going to anchor it to an existing Intune root CA in my Intune tenant. So I'm going to select Intune. And then it will actually, so if I've got if I created multiple root CAs and I want to anchor this one to one versus another one, I could do that. And the reason why we support this flexibility is because some customers want to have a PKI infrastructure service for a particular line of business versus another line of business. And we can do that. All right. So let's go and we select, I'm going to select this one CCP root CA. And I'm going to select the validity period. For the issuing CAs, we support up to 10 years. I'll max it out at 10 years here. Let's go to the key usages. This is essentially what I'm doing here for the key usages. I basically have to constrain my CA to a set of type of certificates, what's called the intended purpose of the CA, that it will issue only certificates with an EKU in this scenario of client auth, email, and smart card logon. So I can select just client auth. So I'm just going to issue certificates with client auth. I can do that. By the way, the root CA dictates which EKUs you will have available to you in the issuing CA to the house, right? And maybe I'm getting into too much detail here, but again, here is the subject name. Here's the common name of the CA. You must provide this detail. So I'll just use the same name. Demo issuing CA1. I'm just going to forego organization, OU, country, state, locality. These are all, again, part of the standards body for a CA. These are optional fields. The required field is the common name for time. I'm just going to stick with the requirements. And then the key size and encryption algo, we support up to 4K key sizes for RSA and SHA-512. You can issue certificates up to those max values. You cannot issue 1024 RSA keys or 128 SHA keys. Just FYI, they're not considered secure anymore. Just real quick, will we support other encryption algorithms? The answer is yes. ECC could probably follow. There's some discussions around quantum. I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, the road ahead is very bright. Let's just put it that way. All right, let's go next. And so I can do scope tags to create visibility or administration controls across different admins that have different rights across the service. I can do all that. And I review all my settings, making sure that everything's right, because once you hit that create button, you cannot go ahead and edit these items, right? You're essentially locked into these items. If you know CAs and that kind of stuff, that's the world we live in. I'm going to hit create, and I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this CA creates, because this CA is actually, this tenant is in what's called the canary tenant. And yes, I created it. Beautiful. So now we hit refresh. All right. And there is the demo issuing CA. Let's go into it. Let's take a look at what it looks like. So now first is the monitor. So as I start issuing certificates, you'll see that these counters will actually go up. Number of issued certificates, number of expired certificates, revoked certificates, total certificates. I can click on view certificates and I see the full list. Again, nothing to show here yet because I haven't issued any certificates. But let's go look at the properties of the CA. Okay, so here's some really cool stuff in here, right? So let me just move this thing in my way here. All right, you see the SCEP URI. So that SCEP URI looks so innocent and simple. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is essentially what you have pained and struggled with all those years with deploying an Endes server. That one simple line there that we make incredibly simple for you, you literally just copy and paste that into your SCEP certificate profile, and voila, you start issuing certificates using this issuing CA. Now, obviously, here's the download key for this issuing CA public key. You have to download the root CA public keys as well, anchor those to the SCEP certificate profile. But that's it. You're issuing certificates now. There's your curl distribution point. There's your AIA distribution point. And again, just remember that this is I'm in a canary environment, part of the dev, staging.
7 minutes. Impressive. Yeah.
So we just created a CA and we can start issuing certificates. Done.
In 7 minutes. That's amazing.
Nice. All right.
Amazing.
So I think that's it.
So we don't really have any time for any more questions, but Micah has a good question that hopefully we can answer very quickly. Everything that you just showed us, you showed us in the Intune console, Intune Admin Center. What about automation? What about graph calls, PowerShell? Can all this be automated?
Everything will be available through the Graph API.
Nice. Excellent. Excellent.
By the way, just being transparent, Graph API docs for Cloud PKI won't go live for about another week or so. So if you're trying to find the graph calls, they won't be there just yet in the docs. They will be there. Just give us a little time.
And again, those docs are aka.ms Cloud PKI docs and aka.ms Microsoft Cloud PKI.
All right. So thanks for joining us today on behalf of Joe, filling in for Danny, and our special guest, Bill Calero. We appreciate everyone showing up. And of course, this recording will be available on the platform of your choice. Visit aka.ms/UEM to keep tabs on future dates. Excited about March's episode where we're going to be talking about data protection, data security with Emily Blendo and Saracen Shane joining us as well.
That's awesome.
Excellent. Excellent. And on behalf of our wonderful production staff, who was awesome today, this has been Unpacking Endpoint Management. Thank you.